Marshall Marquez stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the Seattle skyline disappear into the evening fog. At 42, he built Marquez Design Studio from nothing, a one-man operation working out of his parents' garage, into an award-winning architectural firm with 30 employees and projects spanning 3 states. The Frame magazine covers on his wall told the story. Rising star of Pacific Northwest design, the architect who reimagined urban living, Marshall Marquez, building tomorrow. But none of those accolades could fix what was happening at home. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer, Russell Howe. Colleen's team filed the amended custody motion. They're pushing for primary. Call me. Marshall closed his eyes. 7 months of separation, and somehow his wife of 15 years had transformed into a stranger. No, that wasn't quite right. She transformed into her mother. He remembered the woman he'd married. Colleen Huffman had been different then. Fierce, independent. The black sheep of her wealthy family who'd fallen for a struggling architect with big dreams and empty pockets. Her mother, Glenda Huffman, had made her displeasure known from day one. My daughter deserves better than some nobody drawing pictures for a living, Glenda had told him at their engagement party, loud enough for surrounding guests to hear. This marriage won't last 5 years. It lasted 15, and it was ending exactly the way Glenda had always wanted. Marshall grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. His assistant, a sharp young woman named April Holcomb, looked up from her desk. Heading out, Mr. Marquez? Yeah, I'm picking up Devin from soccer practice. April's expression softened. Everyone at the firm knew about the divorce, about the custody battle. Drive safe. The drive to Mercer Island took 40 minutes in traffic. Marshall used the time to think, to plan. The divorce itself wasn't the problem. Marriages ended. But the way Colleen and her family were handling it, the way they were trying to weaponize his own son against him. Devin was 12 years old. Smart, sensitive, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. For the first 6 months of the separation, the co-parenting had been civil. Marshall had the guest house while they figured things out, then he moved to an apartment downtown. Every other week with Devin. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Then Glenda moved in to help Colleen through this difficult time. Within a month, everything changed. Suddenly Marshall's calls went unanswered. His weekends with Devin got canceled due to scheduling conflicts. His son's texts became shorter, colder, clearly influenced by words that weren't his own. Marshall pulled into the soccer field parking lot. Devin was already waiting by the bleachers, his gear bag slung over one shoulder. Even from a distance, Marshall could see something was wrong. Hey, buddy. Marshall got out of the car. Good practice. Devin didn't answer. He climbed into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Dev? What's going on? Mom says I can't stay with you this weekend. Marshall gripped the steering wheel. We talked about this. The custody agreement. She says the agreement doesn't matter anymore. She says her lawyer is going to make sure I never have to go to your apartment again. Devin's voice cracked. She says you're going to lose. Look at me. Marshall waited until his son's eyes met his. I don't care what lawyers say or what papers get filed. You're my son. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is going to change that. Okay. Devin nodded, but the doubt in his eyes cut Marshall deeper than any legal document ever could. He drove Devin back to the house on Mercer Island. The house Marshall had designed, the house he poured 3 years of his life into creating. Glenda's silver Mercedes was parked in the driveway. Of course it was. I'll see you next week, Marshall said. Dad. Devin paused with his hand on the door handle. I don't like when Grandma talks about you. What does she say? Devin's face reddened. Bad things. Mom too. They talk about you like you're nothing. Marshall reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. Words are just words, Dev. What matters is what we do. Remember that. He watched his son walk into his house, and saw Glenda's face appear briefly in the window. Even from 50 feet away, Marshall could see her smirk. This isn't over, he thought. Not even close. Russell Howe's office was located in a restored brick building in Pioneer Square, all exposed beams and leather furniture. Russell himself was a contradiction. Ivy League education, but he dressed like a construction foreman. Harvard Law, but he talked like a longshoreman. He was also the best family attorney in Washington state. They're going for the throat, Russell said, sliding a folder across his desk. Colleen's claiming you're an absentee father. Work addiction. Emotional unavailability. The usual garbage. Marshall flipped through the pages. This is ridiculous. I coached Devin's soccer team. I never missed a single school event until she started canceling my visits. I know that. You know that. But Glenda Huffman has deep pockets and deeper connections. Russell leaned back. She's been making calls. The judge assigned to your case? He and Glenda's brother played golf together at Broadmoor for 20 years. So the game is rigged. The game is always rigged for people like the Huffmans. That's why we need to change the rules. Marshall studied his friend. They'd known each other since college. Two ambitious kids from working-class families, determined to make something of themselves. Russell had gone to law school. Marshall had gone to architecture school. They'd been each other's best man. What are you suggesting? Russell reached into his drawer and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. I've been doing some digging. The Huffman family fortune came from real estate, legitimate, mostly, but Glenda's late husband, Victor, had some interesting side dealings. Victor died 8 years ago. Yeah, but his secrets didn't. Russell opened the folder. Victor Huffman was part of an investment consortium back in the early 2000s. They bought distressed properties, evicted tenants, including a lot of elderly people on fixed incomes, and flipped the buildings as luxury condos. That's ugly, but not illegal. No, but the way they forced those evictions? Let's just say there's a reason 3 of Victor's partners ended up serving time. Russell tapped a photograph. Glenda wasn't just Victor's wife. She managed the property acquisitions. Every single eviction notice has her signature on it. Marshall looked at the photograph. A younger Glenda, smiling at a charity gala, completely unaware that her hand were covered in invisible blood. This is background, Marshall said, not ammunition. I agree. But here's the thing about people like Glenda Huffman. They spend their whole lives building a facade of respectability. Country clubs, charity boards, church committees. One crack in that facade. Russell snapped his fingers. Everything comes tumbling down. Marshall thought about his son, the way Devin had looked at him outside the soccer field. The doubt, the fear. I'm not interested in destroying Glenda for its own sake, he said. I want my son. That's all I've ever wanted. Then let me keep digging. There's more here. I can feel it. Something Glenda is protecting. Something bigger than a bad reputation. Marshall stood and walked to the window. The rain had started, streaking the glass like tears. Find it, he said. Whatever she's hiding, find it. 3 weeks passed. The custody battle ground on, with Colleen's lawyers filing motion after motion, each one designed to paint Marshall as an unfit father. Meanwhile, Glenda's influence spread like poison. Marshall's clients started canceling contracts. His bank called about routine reviews of his business accounts. An architecture award he'd been nominated for suddenly went to someone else. The Huffman machine was in full operation. But Marshall wasn't sitting still. He hired a private investigator named Blake Groves, a former police detective who'd left the force after refusing to cover up a wealthy family's drunk driving incident. Blake understood what it meant to fight people with money and power. Your mother-in-law is interesting, Blake said during one of their meetings. Very involved in the community. Children's Hospital Board, Arts Foundation, Food Bank volunteer, the SANE Act. Right, but Saints don't usually have offshore accounts in the Caymans. Blake slid a printout across the table. Glenda Huffman has been moving money, a lot of money, through shell companies for the past 6 years. Ever since Victor died. Marshall studied the documents. Where's the money coming from? That's the question. Her declared income doesn't match her expenditures. Not even close. She's spending 3 times what she should be able to afford. Could be inheritance. Hidden assets from Victor. Could be. Or could be something else entirely. Blake leaned forward. Here's what I've learned about the Huffmans. They're not just rich. They're powerful. And powerful people don't stay powerful by playing fair. Marshall's phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. Dad. His blood turned cold. Devin's voice was small, broken, and there was noise in the background. Cars, traffic. Dev? Where are you? Why aren't you calling from your phone? They took it. Mom and Grandma, they took my phone. Dad, I'm scared. Marshall was already moving toward the door. Where are you? Tell me exactly where you are. I'm at Grandma's house. But I'm outside. Dad, they put my stuff in garbage bags. All of it. My clothes, my books, my soccer trophy. They put everything in garbage bags on the lawn. Marshall's vision tunneled. When did this happen? This morning. Mom dropped me off before school, but she told me to come here after. She said, Devin's voice broke into a sob. She said I wasn't welcome at our house anymore because I looked too much like you. Stay there. Do not move. I'm coming. Dad, I can't get inside. I've been waiting for hours. Nobody will open the door. Marshall checked the time. It was nearly 5 p.m. Devin would have gotten to Glinda's house around 3:30. How long have you been waiting outside, Dev? I don't know. A long time. A lady let me use her phone. She's waiting with me because she says it's not safe for a kid to be alone. 7 hours. His 12-year-old son had been sitting outside his grandmother's house, surrounded by garbage bags containing everything he owned for 7 hours. Marshall ended the call and looked at Blake. Something's happened, he said, and his voice was ice. I need you to document everything you can about the Huffman family finances. Every shell company, every offshore account, every dirty secret. What are you going to do? Marshall grabbed his jacket. I'm going to get my son, and then I'm going to burn Glinda Huffman's entire world to the ground. The drive to Glinda's house took forever. Traffic, rain, every red light in the city. Marshall's hands were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He called Russell on the way. They abandoned him, Marshall said. She left a 12-year-old boy sitting outside for 7 hours. Jesus. Is he okay? I don't know. I'm on my way now. This changes everything. This is documented child neglect. Get photos. Get witness statements. Get everything. When Marshall finally pulled up to Glinda's house, a sprawling tutor in one of Seattle's most exclusive neighborhoods, he saw Devin immediately. His son was sitting on the curb, surrounded by bulging garbage bags, a stranger's umbrella held over his head by a middle-aged woman with concerned eyes. Marshall was out of the car before it fully stopped. Dad! Devin ran to him, and Marshall caught his son in a hug so tight neither of them could breathe. Devin was shaking, his clothes damp, his face streaked with tears. I've got you, Marshall said. I've got you. You're safe now. The woman with the umbrella approached. I'm Marian Oliver. I live 2 streets over. I found him sitting here around 4 o'clock when I was walking my dog. I've been trying to get someone to answer that door for hours. Did anyone come out? Mary Ann's expression darkened. About an hour ago, an older woman. Silver hair, expensive coat. She opened the door, looked right at the boy, and said. She hesitated. What did she say? She said, your daddy's blood isn't welcome here anymore. Find somewhere else. Marshall looked at his son. Devin's eyes were red, but there was something else there now, a hardness that no 12-year-old should have. She's not my grandma anymore, Devin whispered. She's nothing. Marshall took photos of the garbage bags, of the house, of the spot on the curb where his son had waited. Mary Ann gave him her contact information and agreed to provide a written statement. Then he loaded his son and the garbage bags into his car and drove away. Where are we going? Devin asked. My apartment. You're staying with me. Mom's going to be mad. Marshall looked at his son. Your mother made her choice. She left you outside like you were trash. She doesn't get to be mad. Devin was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dad, what are you going to do? Marshall thought about Glinda's face in the window. Her smirk. Her certainty that she was untouchable. I'm going to make sure this never happens to you again, he said. And I'm going to make sure the people who did this understand exactly who they're dealing with. The next 4 days were the most focused of Marshall's life. He didn't sleep much, didn't eat much. His world narrowed to 2 things, protecting Devin and preparing for what came next. Russell filed emergency custody motions documenting the abandonment. Blake delivered a comprehensive file on the Huffman family finances, and what he found was even worse than Marshall had expected. The offshore money wasn't from Victor's estate. It was from insurance fraud. Glinda's sister, Edna Irwin, runs a string of medical billing companies, Blake explained during a late-night meeting. For For the past 8 years, she's been overbilling insurance companies for services never rendered. The money gets laundered through Glenda's shell companies and split between them. How much are we talking? Conservatively, $12 million. Marshall looked at the evidence laid out on his dining room table. Bank records, emails, invoice documents with obvious discrepancies. This isn't a custody case anymore, Russell said. This is federal fraud. I know, but I'm not going to the FBI. Not yet. Russell frowned. What do you mean, not yet? Marshall picked up a photograph of Glenda at one of her charity galas. Smiling. Radiant. The picture of respectability. Glenda Huffman has spent her entire life building a wall around herself. Money, connections, reputation. If I just hand this to the FBI, she'll hire expensive lawyers. She'll cut deals. She might even pin the whole thing on her sister and walk away clean. He set the photo down. I'm not going to let that happen. So what's your plan? Glenda's greatest fear isn't prison. It's losing her standing, her identity, everything she's built her sense of self around. Marshall's smile was cold. I'm going to take all of it away from her. Every single piece. And then, when she has nothing left, when she's alone and broken and desperate, that's when I'll give her the coup de grace. Devin appeared in the doorway, wearing pajamas. Dad? Who are you talking to? Marshall softened immediately. Just Uncle Russell. Go back to bed, buddy. I'll be there in a minute. But Devin didn't move. He looked at the papers on the table, at the photographs of his grandmother. Whatever you're planning, he said quietly, make her pay for what she did to me. Father and son looked at each other. An understanding passed between them, something deep and unspoken. I will, Marshall promised. I absolutely will. On the fourth morning, Marshall drove to Glenda Huffman's house. He parked on the street and walked to the front door with deliberate calm. His heart was steady. His mind was clear. In his briefcase was a single folder, the culmination of everything Blake and Russell had uncovered. He rang the doorbell. Nothing happened for 30 seconds. Then a minute. He rang again. Finally, the door opened. Glenda Huffman stood there in a silk robe and perfect makeup, ready for her day of charity work and social climbing. When she saw Marshall, her expression shifted from annoyance to contempt. What do you want? You're not supposed to be anywhere near my property. Actually, there's no restraining order, Glenda. Though I'm sure you're working on that. I'll call the police. Go ahead. I think they'd be very interested in what I have to say. Something flickered in Glenda's eyes. The first crack in her armor. I don't know what you're talking about. Marshall opened his briefcase and handed her the folder. This is everything. The shell companies in the Caymans. The money from Edna's billing fraud. The fake invoices. The whole beautiful mess you've spent 6 years building. Glenda's face went pale. Not pink, not flushed, pale. The blood drained from her features like water from a sink. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it. Bank records, emails, documents with your signature. Marshall tilted his head. Did you know your IT consultant keeps very thorough backups? Very professional of him. Very damaging for you. Glenda clutched the doorframe for support. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Marshall stepped closer. You threw my son away like garbage. You left him sitting outside for 7 hours. You told him his blood wasn't welcome. His voice dropped to a whisper. Now I'm going to show you what it feels like to have everything you love taken away. If you go to the police with this, I'll... Who said anything about the police? Marshall smiled. The Seattle Times got an anonymous tip this morning about corruption on the Children's Hospital Board. Apparently, someone's been embezzling from the charity fund. They're running the story tomorrow. I never touched the charity money. I know, but people will believe you did once they see everything else. Mud sticks Glenda, especially when you're already covered in it. He turned to leave, then paused. By the way, your country club membership is about to get very uncomfortable. I hear the board received some interesting documents about their beloved members' financial history. And the Arts Foundation? Someone forwarded them the same information. He walked down the porch steps. Have a wonderful day. Behind him, he heard Glenda's voice, thin and desperate. Marshall, wait. But he was already gone. The fallout happened faster than Marshall expected. Within 48 hours, Glenda Huffman's carefully constructed world began to collapse. The Seattle Times ran their story, not about Glenda directly, but about irregularities in nonprofit financial reporting. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. The Children's Hospital Board announced an internal review of all members' financial backgrounds. 2 days later, Glenda voluntarily stepped down from her position, citing personal reasons. The country club followed, then the Arts Foundation, then the Garden Society. One by one, the pillars of Glenda's social identity crumbled. Her phone stopped ringing. Her invitations dried up. The women she'd lunched with for decades suddenly couldn't remember her name. Meanwhile, Colleen called Marshall 17 times in one day. He answered on the 18th. "What have you done?" Her voice was raw, panicked. "My mother is falling apart. She says you're trying to destroy her." "I'm not trying to do anything, Colleen. I'm succeeding. This isn't about us. This is about your pride, your ego. This is about Devin." Marshall cut her off with surgical precision. "Our son. The boy you dropped off at your mother's house like an unwanted package. The boy who sat outside in the cold for 7 hours while his grandmother, your mother, refused to even acknowledge his existence." Silence. "Colleen, I loved you once. I would have forgiven almost anything. But you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." He took a breath. "My lawyers will be in touch. Emergency custody hearing is Monday. I suggest you don't fight it." He hung up. Blake Rose called an hour later. "It's done. The FBI received a detailed package about Edna Irwin's billing scheme this morning. Anonymous tip. Completely untraceable. And the connection to Glenda? Spelled out clearly. They'll find a money trail. It's only a matter of time." Marshall looked out his window at the city lights. "How long?" "Best guess, 3 to 6 months before indictments. Maybe faster if Edna decides to cooperate. She will. Family loyalty only goes so far when federal prison is on the table." The emergency custody hearing was held on a gray Monday morning. Marshall sat with Russell on one side of the courtroom. Colleen sat alone on the other. Glenda wasn't there. She'd stopped leaving her house entirely. The judge, a stern woman named Francisca Graves who had no connection to the Huffman family golf buddies, reviewed the evidence with visible disgust. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, looking at Colleen. "You left your 12-year-old son at your mother's residence without confirming anyone would be home. He was then left outside for approximately 7 hours. During this time, your mother refused to allow him entry and told him he was, quote, not welcome because of his father's bloodline." Colleen's lawyer, a slick man named Lance Wagner, started to object. The judge silenced him with a look. "Mrs. Marquez, do you have anything to say?" Colleen stood. For a moment, she looked like the woman Marshall had married. Lost, confused, trying to find solid ground. "My mother, she convinced me that Marshall was the enemy, that he'd poisoned Devin against us, that we needed to take a stand." Her voice cracked. "I should have known better. I should have protected my son instead of letting her." She couldn't finish. Judge Graves made her ruling. Full temporary custody to Marshall, with supervised visitation for Colleen, pending a psychological evaluation. Glenda Huffman was to have no contact with Devin whatsoever until further notice. Outside the courthouse, Russell clapped Marshall on the shoulder. "That's a win. A big one. It's not over yet. You've got custody. Glenda's life is in ruins. What else is there?" Marshall watched Colleen emerge from the building, alone, her lawyer already gone. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "She needs to understand," Marshall said quietly. "Really understand. What she did. What she almost lost." He walked toward his ex-wife. They sat on a bench outside the courthouse, two strangers who had once been partners, parents, lovers. "Do you remember when we first met?" Colleen asked. "You were giving a lecture at the university. Something about sustainable design. You asked a question about bamboo flooring. Completely off topic." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I just wanted you to notice me." "I noticed you." Marshall stared at the passing traffic. "I noticed you for 15 years. Through everything. Through your mother's comments and your family's condescension. Through the lean years when we couldn't afford dinner out. Through all of it." "I know. Then how could you do this, Colleen? How could you let them treat our son like that?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My mother has a way of twisting things. She gets in your head. She convinces you that up is down, that the people who love you are actually your enemies. Colleen wiped her eyes. It doesn't excuse anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I need you to understand, I was sick. I think I still am. Marshall thought about his son. About the boy who'd sat outside for 7 hours, surrounded by garbage bags, believing he was unwanted. Get help, he said finally. Real help. Not whatever your mother's been telling you to do. Find a therapist, someone who specializes in family dynamics. Work on yourself. And then we'll see. Devin loves you, Colleen. Despite everything, he still loves you. I won't be the one who takes that away from him. He stood to leave. Marshall, she looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for not destroying me too. He didn't answer. He wasn't sure she was right. 3 months later, the FBI executed search warrants at Edna Irwin's office and Glenda Huffman's home simultaneously. The news footage showed Glenda being escorted to a waiting sedan, her face covered, her once perfect posture reduced to a defeated shuffle. The charges were extensive: money laundering, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, tax evasion. Prosecutors estimated the scheme had defrauded insurance companies of nearly $15 million over 8 years. Edna, facing the same charges plus primary responsibility for the fraud itself, cut a deal within a week. Her testimony painted Glenda as a full and knowing participant, not just a passive recipient of funds, but an active architect of the concealment strategy. Glenda's trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marshall watched the verdict on television, Devin beside him on the couch. The boy had grown in the past months, taller, more confident, slowly healing from the trauma of that terrible day. She's going to prison, Devin said. Grandma's actually going to prison. How do you feel about that? Devin considered the question carefully. I don't know. Glad, I guess. But also sad? Is that weird? That's not weird. That's human. Marshall put his arm around his son. You can be angry at someone for what they did and still mourn who they could have been. That's what makes us different from them. The news showed Glenda being led away in handcuffs. Her face was hollow, her eyes empty. All the money, all the connections, all the carefully cultivated respectability, none of it could protect her now. Dad, Devin looked up at him. You planned all of this, didn't you? You knew exactly what would happen. Marshall thought about the past months. The investigation. The strategic leaks. The careful dismantling of Glenda's social infrastructure before delivering the final blow. I knew she would face consequences, he said carefully. The exact outcome. That was up to fate. Devin nodded slowly. Good. She deserved it. Maybe. But here's the important thing, Dev. What happened to your grandmother? That's not what defines us. What defines us is what we do next. How we treat people. Whether we break the cycle or continue it. I understand. Marshall hoped that was true. He hoped his son could carry the lessons of these terrible months without carrying the weight of bitterness and revenge. He hoped he could too. 1 year later, Marshall stood at the window of his new office. Larger now, the firm having expanded despite, or perhaps because of, the Huffman scandal. His reputation had only grown. People admired a man who protected his son, who stood up against powerful adversaries, who refused to be intimidated. The door opened, and April appeared. Your 2 o'clock is here, Mr. Marquez. And your son called. He made the travel soccer team. Marshall smiled. Devin was thriving. Regular therapy sessions had helped him process the trauma. A new school had given him a fresh start. Colleen, true to her word, had sought professional help and slowly rebuilt her relationship with their son through supervised visits that were gradually becoming unsupervised. She would never be the same woman Marshall had married. But perhaps that was for the best. Send my 2 o'clock in, Marshall said, and call Devin back. Tell him I'm proud of him and we're celebrating tonight. Will do. As April left, Marshall's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I heard about Glenda's sentencing. 5 years. She'll be out in 3. You should watch your back. Marshall stared at the message. A threat from the Huffman orbit. Someone who still believed in the old ways, the old power structure. Someone who hadn't learned. He typed a response. I'm not hard to find. Come at me whenever you're ready. Then he deleted the message thread and turned back to his work. The past was the past. Glinda was paying for her crimes. Devin was safe. The future was bright. And if someone wanted to test Marshall Marquez again, they were welcome to try. He'd already proven what he was capable of. 18 months after Glinda's conviction, Marshall received a visitor at his office. She was thinner than he remembered, her silver hair now iron gray, her designer clothes replaced by something simpler and cheaper. Prison had stripped away all her pretense. "You look surprised," Glinda said. "Didn't think I'd use my furlough to see you. I hoped you wouldn't." They stood on opposite sides of his office, two fighters who had already concluded their war but couldn't quite leave the battlefield. "I'm not here to threaten you," Glinda said, "or beg for mercy. I know what I did. I've had 18 months to think about nothing else." And she sat down, uninvited, in one of his client chairs. "I created a monster. Myself, I mean. I spent my entire life building walls, money, status, control. I convinced myself that anyone outside those walls was a threat, including you, especially you, because I wasn't good enough for your daughter, because you were good enough. That's what terrified me." Glinda's eyes were wet. "You didn't need me. You didn't need my approval or my money. You just loved her, loved Devin. I couldn't control that, so I tried to destroy it." Marshall walked to the window. The city spread out before him, indifferent to human drama. "You almost succeeded," he said. "You almost broke my son. I know, and I have to live with that forever." She stood, moving slowly. "I didn't come here expecting forgiveness. I came because I needed you to understand something." "What's that?" "You were always the better parent, the better person. I was so busy protecting my family's image that I forgot what family actually means." She paused at the door. "Devin doesn't want to see me. I don't blame him. But if there's ever a chance for me to apologize to him, that's not my decision to make. It's his." Glinda nodded. "I understand. Goodbye, Marshall." She left without another word. Marshall stood at his window for a long time after she was gone, thinking about justice and revenge, about mercy and consequence. He had broken Glinda Huffman, methodically, completely, deliberately, and she had deserved it. But watching her walk away, diminished, defeated, utterly alone, Marshall felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just sadness. That evening, he took Devin to their favorite restaurant, a small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and an elderly owner who knew them by name. "You seem quiet," Devin said over his spaghetti. "Everything okay? Your grandmother came to see me today." Devin's fork paused midway to his mouth. What did she want? To apologize, to explain, to try to understand what she did and why. Do you believe her? Marshall considered the question carefully. "I believe she suffered. I believe prison changed her. Whether she's actually better." He shrugged. "People rarely change that much." Devin was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't want to see her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's your choice, and it's a valid one." But Devin looked at his father with eyes that were older than his years. "I'm glad she had the chance to apologize to you. Even if I never forgive her, I want her to understand what she did. She understands." "Good." Devin went back to his spaghetti. "Can we talk about something else now? My history teacher is the worst." Marshall smiled. This was what mattered. Not the victory over Glinda. Not the destruction of the Huffman Empire. This, his son, healthy and whole, able to move forward without being consumed by the past. The revenge had been necessary. The justice had been earned. But the real triumph was simpler. A boy who could still laugh, still dream, still love. Everything else was just noise. 5 years later, Marshall Marquez was featured on the cover of Architecture Digest for the third time. His firm had grown into one of the most respected in the Pacific Northwest, known for innovative, sustainable design and community-focused development. Devin was 17 now, a senior in high school with early acceptance letters from 3 different universities. He'd inherited his father's eye for design and his mother's stubborn determination. Colleen had remarried, a quiet accountant named Edwin Green who was nothing like Marshall, but perfect for the woman she'd become. Their relationship was cordial. They co-parented effectively. The old wounds had scarred over. Glinda had served her full sentence after an appeal failed. She lived now in a small apartment in Tacoma, working part-time at a nonprofit that helped elderly people fight evictions. The irony was not lost on Marshall. One afternoon, a letter arrived at his office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, the garbage bags on Glenda's lawn, taken by someone that day 5 years ago. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, "I keep this photo so I never forget what I almost lost. I'm sorry. Gee." Marshall looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he put it in his desk drawer and got back to work. The past was the past. The future was waiting, and his son was coming to the office after school to work on his college portfolio. That was all that mattered. That was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.